Howdy, y'all. Conservatives and Republicans like to talk a lot about taking the moral high ground. Oh, well, we have the moral high ground in this situation. We don't want we say that the drag queens coming into libraries is evil. We say that, teaching this stuff in schools is evil. We say that doing these things to kids are evil, or, the Democrats do this and this to manipulate elections, or whatever the case might be. You can probably think of other examples yourselves, but we don't do that. We have the moral high ground. But is it really having the moral high ground, or are we just losing? Republicans and conservatives are known for not using political power, and I want to focus at first on the conservatives. The practical definition of conservative is political conservative, not just the term in general, is wanting to preserve or conserve the old ways, right? Well, we want to do things like the founding fathers did them and all that kind of stuff. And there's a few problems with that. One problem is that no platform can exist solely on the idea of preserving something, just on being opposition, right? Not today, anyway. The other is that, really focusing on the stagnation part of that, if the old path is productive enough or active enough, perhaps that can work. The problem is they're wanting to stagnate things. Like, well, we want to go back to the way it was, but that doesn't mean anything directly. There's no results to be discerned from that. It's just this vague, let's go back to the way it was. And that's also not considering the fact that what they claim to want to go back to was active. What they claim to want to go back to was building, you think about the principles of Western civilization and American culture and so on, that idea of building something of value, of doing what's right, of building prosperity, of building a family, most importantly, building a business, of making art and music and culture and all these different things, of producing something of innate value from your culture, and not just stagnating and surviving, but actually living humanity and doing something more than the bare minimum. But we don't see us doing that. What are we building? And that's a great question. That also ignores the fact that, they claim to want to go back, they claim to hail the founding fathers and all that sort of thing, and yet our government, our country looks nothing like what the founding fathers intended. And do you hear conservatives or saying that needs to change, that we need to take radical or significant action to actually go back to what the founding fathers said? No, it's just a line of talk to sound good and to claim you can feel good morally about yourself because we want to go back to our founding, and yet do nothing to go back to our founding. There's several issues with that. Again, what are we building, right? What are we doing to actually show that this is a viable course of action? Well, in a lot of cases, most conservatives, and a lot of times, are doing nothing, especially on the more, influential, powerful side. People are starting to change. I don't want to act like there's no hope. People are starting to realize, yeah, we do need to start businesses to oppose this. Yeah, we do need to be willing to stand on what's right. Yeah, we do need to take your pick, right? And be careful where we spend our dollar and all those sorts of things. And people are starting to recognize that. But we have to recognize and have focus in what we're doing, and not just kind of vaguely beat around the bush sort of thing. We're not really focused on why or what we're doing. We need to have razor sharp focus and purpose in trying to achieve something substantive with our actions, and for quote unquote conservatism, to use that general term. We need to understand that if we're right, and we are, you're talking about absolute right and wrong here. And that's a big issue, right? Because if there is no absolute right or wrong, then, well, it makes the video very short, because it's, well, we like conservatism and they like leftism. So it's really, if there's no right and wrong, it's the rule of power. It's the authority of power. Whoever can practically and does practically enforce their will is right. If there is no absolute right and wrong, we have to recognize that. But then it's just a matter of, well, we can use whatever means necessary to enforce conservatism, because, there's no right or wrong, and it's just whoever wins effectively. And that's how they see it. That's not true, but that's how they see it on the left. But it would make for a short video. But if we're right, and we are, right and wrong, then eventually we have to come to terms with the concept of enforcement and the necessity of enforcement, because we're right. Now, that's not, controlling exactly what people do or think, right? We tend to attach arbitrary definitions without realizing that part of what's right includes variability for people to have, some flexibility for people to have and make their own decisions, right? But there's limits. There's natural limits. And enforcement isn't just, the use of political power, say through legislation or regulation. It can be as simple as, hey, people are now emboldened and have the guts to say to someone in public that's doing something wrong or evil, that's wrong, or that's evil, or that's messed up, or you need to cut that out. And using social power, using other practical power to enforce what's right, not opinion, what's right and wrong. Going along to get along, as seems to be the standard operating procedure, or hoping to find some kind of common ground and therefore not actually pushing anything that's right on a practical level, is a waste of time. You cannot share fundamentally contradictory views about the way the world works, about right and wrong, if right and wrong exists at all, in the same group, the same country, if you want to use that term, because that's what we're talking about in a general sense, the same culture, whatever. You cannot share those contradictory views. Practically what's going to happen is one side is going to enforce its worldview and the other side isn't, because they're exclusive, they're mutually exclusive, they're contradictory. And we have to recognize that fact. And it also goes, and this is something that's undermined the conservative movement, if you want to use that term, very much, is the foolishness of freedom is just doing whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt someone else, in the privacy of your home, whatever. That libertarian definition of freedom, not the founding fathers' definition of freedom, not even the leftist definition of freedom. The libertarian definition of freedom, and I've talked about the problems with libertarianism before I came over to the YouTube channel. I'll probably do that again relatively soon, hopefully, kind of break down libertarianism. And it has a lot of problems, and it's very dangerous. But that libertarian definition of freedom is false, it's wrong, and it's foolish. We understand that for society to function, for us to be able to walk outside, to go to work, to go to the grocery store, there are certain things that are not allowed, right? You can think theft and murder and the obvious ones, right? But if there are behaviors that aren't allowed, and we can't have anarchy everywhere except the public square, that's not how people work. If people determine what's in the public square, if people are living like heathens, if they're leading hedonistic lifestyles, I'm getting tongue-tied here. If they're leading hedonistic lifestyles, they just do whatever feels right, that will pour over into the public square very quickly, because what we do, even if it's in the privacy of our own homes, affects other people. And that's something we don't like to admit, because it implies the obligation of moral responsibility, right? But the famous English poet John Donne, I believe, said that no man is an island. And that's very true. We can't, even when we do things privately, expect for that to not spill over to other people for a lot of reasons. There's people that care about us, family, friends, and so on, God even, the supreme being that cares for us. There's also the fact that what we do affects and comes from our character. If we do evil, even if it's in the privacy of our own home, then that affects other people, because our character becomes or is evil, and that will manifest itself in the public square eventually, even if it's not immediate. And there's other points there too, but that's something we have to recognize. Some behavior can't be allowed, some behavior can be. That's just the way the world works. We have to choose what we want allowed. Do we want righteousness and virtue and wisdom? Do we want people trying to spend the short hours of their life in the service of a cause of something greater than themselves, of righteousness, of building something for the generations after them, of doing something innately worthwhile? Or do we want greed and selfishness and hedonistic debauchery of all kinds, and child mutilation and tyranny and self-destruction? What do you want? That's what it comes down to. Which side do we want to be the practical limits of allowable behavior? And of course, tyranny comes from all the chaos of evil, and because chaos is not sustainable long term, so then it's just we're controlled, and evil probably still is common too, but it's more stabilized through arbitrary rules decided by one or a few people. The Republicans don't use power when they have it because they're Republicans. Actually, they really are using their power. The way they're using it is by not using it. Because Republicans are the controlled opposition party. I think more and more people are realizing this, but Democrats and Republicans are on the same team. On the government or elitist team, they're not on our side, they're on their side. And they want to take whatever they can from us to increase the power and influence and safety, security of their side. They'll pretend to oppose the evil leftism with fiery speeches on the floor of Congress and killer questions on those congressional subcommittees and all that kind of thing. But when you look at their definable actions, their voting, the bills they propose, whether they're meant to fail or not, whether they seem good on the surface, but when you dig into them, there's not much there, even bad things. When you look at their definable actions, they not only usually don't oppose the things they claim to oppose, they also actively support them a lot of times as well. It's all a show, right? It's to keep you down thinking, I don't have to do too much because my guy's in office, because they look like they're doing something. And that's what it's about. It's about appearances, political theater, right? They look like they're doing well, and so you just hopefully can kind of stick your head in the sand just enough, or think that things are okay or going in the right direction, while tyrants come up behind you and put the shackles on you. If their establishment, the vast majority of Republicans are, they're untrustworthy. Again, a different entity from the American people, the establishment, the government, whatever term you want to use. And then consider this, moral high ground means nothing if we're not willing to enforce what we believe. It's similar to the whole what is a woman issue. If you can't define a woman, what a woman is, then claiming the title of woman is meaningless, is substanceless. In a very similar way, if we can't define what having the moral high ground is and the actions necessitated by it, just like the reality necessitated by a real definition of a woman, then the term or claiming the moral high ground is meaningless. It's substanceless. It means nothing. Let's say we have the moral high ground, and we do. We're right and they're wrong. Again, right and wrong is the issue. Good and evil is the issue here. And of course, obviously, we're always conscious of our own shortcomings and potential failings, obviously, but I do want to mention that. What good does it do for us to sit back and claim we have the moral high ground if they win, if they steamroll us, if we don't stand up against them? What does it matter to say we have the moral high ground? And do we have the moral high ground at all if we didn't fight to stop them? We must understand that there's a fight for the power, the reins of power in America, and they've been taking it from us piece by piece for decades. We must ditch the hesitancy to call for the use of political power along with any other power we have, and to be confident in the truth. The reality is the left uses whatever means necessary, evil, not evil, legitimate, illegitimate, whatever they can to enforce their worldview, while we don't even use the legitimate means that we still have for the moment. That's the fact, and we have to reject that and be willing to say that political power has to be used to stand up for what's right. When America was great, these things were not an issue. This was the accepted way things worked. When America was really great, when America was in its prime, never let them convince you otherwise. Again, the definition of freedom was not what we think it is today and everything else. Many topics for other videos, but remember that and grasp right and reject wrong. Hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget the social media that we have linked down in the description below. And don't forget about the Patreon if you'd like to support me in a more personal way. And don't forget our merchandise store as well. Remember, friends, as long as you and I are doing what's right, we make a real difference in this old world. It's been Ryan Dalton, the Kentuckian, signing off.